Good evening. I'm going to call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, November 28th to order. My name is Janet Godwin, and I want to thank those in the audience, those watching on television, and those keeping track via Twitter for joining us tonight for our meeting. I'll start our meeting tonight by introducing those at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Steve Murley, Directors Ruthina Malone, Phil Hemingway, Lori Rotland, J.P. Clausen, Sean Eystone, Paul Ressler, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. So with that, we will move to community comment. And on deck, we have just one commenter, Lucas Van Orten.
Good evening, Lucas Van Orden. To those of you who are new, welcome. Ruthina, thank you for your time as board president. And Janet, welcome to the board as board president. A couple quick items for you. You've got the facilities master plan accelerated building schedule on you for this evening. Consider it one voice of yes, thank you. Acceleration is a really nice idea. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to do a little bit of a shout out for your administrative staff. You really have exceptionally fine people running the show behind the scenes for you. You will find I have a history of kind of coming up and giving them a little bit of a voice because unfortunately I think there's a shockingly low number of people who will come in and say, hey, you know, people like Craig and Lisa do really, really fine work because the only time you tend to hear them in the news is when something's being bitched at about. I like to speak to the cooperative working relationship that the board has with the administrative team and the trust that is placed in them. They give you good counsel. On the occasion that you don't take their counsel, okay, fine, you know, that's why you're a board. But I am pleased to see the counsel that Craig gave you on the savings that can be had with accelerating this. I think it's an excellent example of where these people are working very hard behind the scenes to get good results for the district. Steve, thank you for your people. That's it. So have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. With that, we will move into our consent agenda for the night. We've got 11 or 10 consent items.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Kim, ready to vote? Oh, I'm sorry. I always forget that. Phil, can you give us the review of the bills?
Yes. Sean Eystone and myself went over the bills on Monday, and we had some questions which we went to Craig with and were brought up to speed on those issues and concerns. We did have $96,972 worth of GO bond spending in this pay period. But on that, I move that we go forward on the consent vote.
Thank you very much. Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Appendix 7, Iowa City Community School District new school name.
So at Policy and Governance, we covered Appendix 7. We kind of reverted back. You'll see there's two attachments in there. There's one that says current, which is what we currently have. There were some things in there that we no longer have in that policy. For example, the Advocacy and Engagement Committee doesn't exist anymore. So we looked at the old Appendix 7 process and made one change in there and thought that was a much better way to move forward with school naming. So the only thing that we changed on that was the 5th bullet point. We changed screening committee recommends the name to the board instead of just the board president.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the Appendix 7, Iowa City Community School District new school name.
Second.
Okay, I'm ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for the update. School naming process, there's a recommendation, Steve?
Yeah, so we follow a formal scripted process for this, and depending on the level of the school, either Amy or Matt chairs the committee for that. And so we followed that process for the new school across from South Slope on Maffey Bridge Road. And I'm going to ask Amy to give an update on the committee's work and maybe a little synopsis of the last committee's work because they overlap.
Sure. So thank you, everyone. In board docs, you'll find a recommendation regarding the new name for the elementary building to be built across from South Slope in North Liberty. And the committee does recommend the name Christine Grant be transferred to the new elementary. So unique to this committee is we knew we needed to take some time to understand what had occurred during that 2014 naming committee process and felt it imperative to pull together as many group members or get their opinions on whether they really believed they were tasking that new name to the particular site or if it was just to be that new building to be built in North Liberty. And so the two groups came together on October 24th, and you can see the process that we utilized. And that night, should we have come to the decision that we would still like to consider other names, and we kind of outlined the process for the two committees during that evening, but you can see that the recommendation was just to transfer. So I would like to recognize 5 other people that served that evening that are here tonight. Of course, Kristen Peterson, our Director of Community Affairs. But we have Josh Schomburger and Jen Greer, Nick Proud, and Keisha Field. So 2 of them represent are representatives from 2014 committee and 2 from the 2017 committee. So with that, I would entertain questions.
Questions?
Any questions?
Sorry, I should also recognize Sean. Sean sat on the committee as well. I apologize.
I don't have any questions. I'll just make one comment because, I worked with Christine on the board of the Rape Victims Advocacy Program and just grew to know her passion for victims' rights. And I wholeheartedly support this and really enthusiastic that we're going to name a school after someone who's really a lion in the women's athletics field and really standing up for the rights of victims. And I'm really proud to vote for it.
Is there a motion to approve the naming?
I move we approve the committee recommendation of Christine Grant for the new elementary building to be built across from South Slope in North Liberty.
I'll second that.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, and thank you for the team that worked on that. I appreciate your efforts very much. The next item is attendance area development update. I'll start this off. We had a work session a couple of weeks ago where the board and staff talked about boundaries and some of the needs in the community district around boundaries. We decided that while there's a lot of need in the community around boundary work, that we would like to first focus on the North Lincoln area. And we'd like to ask the administrative team to develop a process and execute on that process and bring a recommendation forward back to the board for approval of that attendance zone. Again, we recognize there's a sense of urgency for that North Lincoln area, and we would like the administrative team to come up with a process that engages the community through that set of recommendations and bring that back to us. So.
And we would be most ready to do that. Amy and I have already started that planning process, identified areas of the district that will need to be involved in that based on the current catchment areas that were assigned when we were originally looking at the school and the Scanlon Farms property and developed the attendance areas for the 2019-20 school year. So we're in the process of putting a system together for that and would certainly have that prepared and ready to go as we move into the new calendar year.
Very good. Any questions from board members on that topic? Forward to the update from the administrative team on that. There's no vote required on that, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the legal counsel update. I'll provide an update on that and ask for any comments from my colleagues here, but we went through a process where we spent some time with Joe Holland, learned more about the breadth and depth of his work for the district over a number of years. I think, especially for the new board members, we did not have that exposure to the breadth of Joe's work, and so we've gone through that process, had a dialogue with board staff and Joe, and we feel very comfortable going forward with Joe's services. We did discuss that we would like to move into a process on an annual basis where we sit down with Joe and have a dialogue about the year and any ideas that we might learn from our experience from that year. As a learning organization, we're all about continuous improvement, but we would like to thank Joe for her services and look forward to working with him this year. Any other comments, Steve, from you or board members? So with that, I think we can close that item around legal counsel review. And again, thank you, Joe, for your work on behalf of the district. With that, we'll move on to the next item, Students Against Hate and Discrimination update. And I think Steve and Kingsley.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn this over to Kingsley. Just one of the things I draw your attention to is that after the students presented last time, Kingsley was not here. He had a competing city council event that evening, or a meeting that evening, and so we worked collectively as a team to put together some information to share with you about progress we've made in these areas. So Kingsley can certainly elaborate on that and answer any additional questions that you might have.
Yeah, so good evening, board. A couple of these things were addressed in the memo. I'd like to hear questions that may range around this particular issue. I would highlight a couple of things that are currently happening. There has been some correspondence back and forth with members of SOD. I do want to go back and say that as far as reaching out in the same way to City High, that hasn't occurred. But with West High, we've had some significant correspondence going back and forth. They've actually accessed one of the Google Docs that we created last year to develop the workshop. Many of the demands, I think, again, are listed out here. The one in particular that I think was focused on is around classes and looking at a social justice class or curriculum that's currently happening and being done by Diane Schumacher and Brady Shutt. But additionally, we're looking at working with Dr. Lisa Covington from the University of Iowa. She has done this before in the collegiate level, and she's decided and offered her services to do this here at the district level as well. The only issue was more from a timing perspective, and she's a current graduate student, and so it's difficult for her to facilitate and have some time around, some space around that. And so basically we weren't able to get it done for the second trimester, but the thought is that we'll be able to get it done for the third trimester, and we'll be able to incorporate that class. I'm excited about it. That's why I'm actually bringing it up as a highlight, because I think that it would be something, if I was in high school, I'd like to take as well. She's also been in conjunction and talking to many of the girls that are associated with Students Against Hate, SOD, and discrimination through G-World. And so she's had some of those conversations already, and I think that in general people are excited about it. I have some emails and some correspondence I need to get back with her in relation to some speakers and things along the lines that she's interested in as well. That's really it. I mean, I think that kind of from a general perspective, the conversation really started pretty earnestly last year. Fell off, as things fall off in the summer. As far as what that would look like, and I know there was some type of hiatus because many of them were seniors, and also many of them have exams and are doing wonderful things in college and preparing for college and preparing for some high-level courses they have as well. And so, I sent a recent email just to say, some of the conversation I think needs to happen through administration to one of the representatives of SOD, and so I think that whatever they want to plan, obviously I'm interested in helping whatever that may look like. Some of the information is already currently there and available via that Google Doc. But yeah, that's basically it.
I do have a couple questions.
Yeah.
And maybe for you, Matt, Steve, I don't know, whoever wants to cover it. So after that meeting was over, the last meeting that we just had, I went back and looked at the minutes from the education meeting where we covered the topic of basically this class that we wanted to talk about having. And from the notes, from the minutes, it says that after much discussion between Students Against Hate and Discrimination representative and the committee, there was a consensus to move forward with option 3, knowing that we modified and brought back for review. So just for clarification, this would be probably the first time that we've heard back on any, I don't know, maybe I'm missing it, you guys that were on the board, that we've heard back from about that, what the update is on what that class stands, or?
Yeah, outside of the memo,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be the first, because it's not necessarily, set in stone. I mean, we've had conversations, I think, starting from about a month and a half ago, just kind of toying around with the idea, how that would look like, where would we put it? Would it be an elective class? How kids would get credit for it? And so it hasn't really been formalized. Matt and I were going back and forth as far as whether or not we'd actually be able to put the curriculum on the agenda, because I didn't necessarily get a chance to talk to Dr. Covington about putting her information out there like that without getting her permission first. And so it's been fluid, but I feel like at least with the conversations that I've had with Diane, Matt as well. I mean, we were looking at the third trimester. We just did not have time to do it for the second trimester.
And when you say looking at it for third trimester, what grade level?
So that's the interesting part about it. When we were talking about kind of the level of the materials that we're looking at for this particular class, while there was some transferring from going from the collegiate level to the high school level, we talked about some of the rigorousness of the material that's being discussed. We were looking at 11 and 12, but I mean, effectively, because it's an elective course, we want to make sure it's open from 9 through 12, but it really is still just a timing standpoint as far as whether or not people can put it in their schedule.
And the reason I bring that up is because going back to that work session, I think, and I re-listened to this part of it as well, we discussed, I think, pretty heavily in there that maybe I and some of the other members, and that option three was to incorporate it into 7th and 9th grade. And the reason that we were talking about 7th and 9th grade is, especially 7th grade, a couple reasons. One, that's the first time a lot of kids are together in a setting outside of what they're used to in grade school and exposed to a lot of this stuff. And also that the 7th grade level, there's, at least in my opinion, there's a lack of electives or classes there. There's a lot of study hall time, I guess, especially since we have taken out foreign language in the 7th grade level. So I feel like the 7th grade part of it's getting skipped over a little bit here, especially if you're going to 9th to 10th, or 11 and 12th grade.
Right. I think we have a couple different things going on. So Kingsley's talking about the specific kind of addition, and then Diane can maybe touch on some of the work we did over the summer with that 7th and 9th grade option as well. So.
Right. So if you look at option three was not to create an additional course. Option 3 was to integrate the concepts into courses that already exist that would address all students because they're required courses and they wouldn't be an elective. So that's the, I guess, movement that we've been working toward is, can we develop units that we can integrate? And we already have started that work, and we continue to do that work. It's a, complex topic that we want to do professionally and respectfully, but we are continuing to integrate units in those courses rather than create an additional elective. Now, Kingsley is working on kind of going above and beyond that to create a possible elective. But the direction we got at the time from the board was to integrate that within a required course.
And I apologize, I didn't do a good job of separating that when I was mentioning it, but that was the work I was talking about with Diane and Brady as far as them looking at that integration within the curriculum.
There's a couple of questions, and also I don't know if the chair would allow the students that are here to come forward and make any comments that they wish concerning this. They didn't come forward during community comments, but we kind of put this on the agenda for them, and they're here, and if they would like to come forward and comment, I think we should provide them an opportunity to do so.
I'm not sure about our protocol during agenda items. I know we can have time at the end of the meeting. I'm looking for advice or counsel on that protocol question.
Yeah, this is a topic that they're involved with that would be any different than if people that were on the naming committee would have been talking about the naming stuff.
Thank you.
So if the students would wish to come forward and make any comments on this, we'd welcome it. I just had a question. Is there any SOD organization at Liberty? maybe you, maybe the
Let's say,
students
maybe
could
you
ask.
should ask them, yeah.
Do you have any group at Liberty High School?
As of right now, we do not have any affiliates at Liberty High.
Okay.
We are in contact with a few students at Liberty, but we don't have any official Assad members there.
Okay. Well, are there any comments you'd like to make to us tonight?
We would really like to emphasize the fact that integration alone is not a feasible option just because there is cultural knowledge in our curriculum in the status quo. We've seen it not working, and we're really hesitant to see this integration take place and to have the same things continue happening. We don't know who's in charge of having these discussions or what exactly is being added to the curriculum. That hasn't been disclosed. It's not transparent. And this is all happening very much behind the scenes, it seems, which is not what we asked for. And additionally, it seems like rather than addressing our request for a diversity course and cultural heritage and knowledge education, we're getting this kind of sidetrack.
Yeah. As I said before last time, infusion is definitely important and it should be happening already, but standing alone, it's not enough and it's not going to do what we want it to do, which is like giving students the time to honestly dig deep into these content, like into these different discussions that we need to be having. In a trimester, there's already a set curriculum for American studies, for world history, for global studies, for whatever we have. And so infusion is not enough to really be able to focus on those concepts, and the time that needs to be given to those discussions is not enough infusion is not enough for that.
Also, we don't want random teachers talking about it, we would like to have our teachers talk about it, but we want someone qualified, such as Lisa Covington, to teach us about it, and she'll actually have real-life experiences with it. And also having a trimester course allows us to actually dig deep into it and spend a full trimester talking about the issues, rather than just spending a week in our American Studies classes or just talking about it on the side of one of our classes. We believe that infusion is good, but it's not enough to actually get what we want.
Can I ask you guys a question? As you're imagining what this course looks like, I get you want to discuss probably contemporary stuff, what's going on, and heritage. I mean, is this a little bit of a history, cultural history? Because I can imagine lots of stuff, and a trimester is not enough, right? So I'm wondering what, from your perspective, because you're students, and whether you guys get to do this or not, right? You're doing the work for all these folks that come after you, right? Like, this is what you're doing. So what do you see as a student, what do you think you would get the most out of?
And we have put a lot of thought into this. We spent plenty of time discussing what we would want this course to look like and what we want out of it. And as you said, a trimester is not enough, but it's a start. That's what we're asking for as a start. And we haven't even really gotten that. And we see this course as something that would teach minority students within our district about their cultural backgrounds, as well as what their role is in society today, why things are happening the way they're happening in the world around them. That's all very prudent and relevant knowledge. It'll never not be relevant.
I think it also needs to be emphasized that this class is not solely for minority students, but this class is for everybody can benefit from this class. And we do want a little bit of history with it, like we want it to be, we're in this world today, how did we get here? And how does slavery that seems so long ago, 400 years ago, affect what's going on today? How does the colonization so long ago still have it still has effects today? We want it to be history, but also current events, but also a little bit of mix of just what's going on, what happened in the 50s and the 60s. We want it a little bit of everything. And like you said, a trimester is definitely not enough to fully cover everything, but it's definitely a start, and I think it's urgent enough that we will take a trimester, will take an elective course as a start for it. Do you have any comments?
Other questions? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I just think that it should mainly be about like contemporary stuff about today, like pretty much what she said, along with like some history and background knowledge, because we got here because of our past. We have to know how we got here, not just that we're randomly here. We have to know where all like everything, like why everything is the way it is today, which would help us understand why it is the way it is today, I guess. So like we want like to learn about what's happening today, but talking about the past would also be beneficial too. So
Text.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Additionally, integration is definitely not enough because you can spend one day a week talking about those things, but there isn't enough time in a trimester. There is even less time, believe it or not, in a year when there's already a set curriculum and this is not a part of it. This would be teachers infusing what they see as enough, and it's not going to be a sufficient amount of time to such a relevant topic or such relevant topics. We need
Have you guys had the experience? Have you had experiences in your gen ed, say social studies classes, where you feel there are teachers, and I don't want you to name anybody, but where they have already infused this kind of stuff, and you feel you're learning about the history and getting some context?
So yeah, this
Okay.
is available, but some of the courses that like where it's available is only like AP courses. For example, AP US History, right? That's where we like that's a class that I'm taking where we really dig into stuff. But it's an AP course, and it's an advanced level course where it's not like available to everybody. You know, it's available, but not everybody is willing to take an AP course and like put in all that time and devotion. Who don't like? Some people are busy, you know, and some people just don't want to stress themselves out any more than they already are. And so I think it should be like just a general class, not like an AP course or an honors course.
Additionally, even if some of these things are briefly spoken about in AP courses, I have an example from today even. We had a discussion in AP Worlds about Mansa Musa, who was like the founding ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, but that was only maybe a 10-minute discussion at the beginning of class before we had to move on. And even though I would have loved to delve deeper into that history and that background that I can relate to, we didn't have the time for it and will not be returning to it.
And that's understandable because there's a curriculum. Like they need to teach certain things by the end of the trimester, by the end of the year, and like we get that. That's why we think like a new curriculum would not like put that class behind or like slow it down because we're focusing on other things.
There's a lot to cover in AP.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be taking away from the curriculum that's already there. It would be supplementing it. And this could happen in conjunction with the integration that you all have spoken of, but integration alone will not do much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now, Steve, could you highlight as far as the path forward, the concerns the students have expressed?
Yep, so two things. So Kingsley's working with the high school leadership teams to get the elective formatted and ready to go for third trimester this year. And then Diane is working with the curriculum teams on the infusion piece, because I think if you listen to the students, I think the issue that we're dealing with is what's sufficient and what's necessary, and those are two different things, and I think that's essentially what they were saying. Yes, we need to continue with the infusion work. That has to be part of the baseline, but then what are the other alternatives that are out there for us? And so we're working on both of those right now.
Okay. Well, I would encourage you to keep making your case that way. And before we get off of this, I'm just curious, Kingsley, if you can, on the anti-bullying and the anti-sexual assault poster and those programs, do you have any numbers or anything to share as far as if the response successful?
I would say in general it's been really successful. I don't necessarily have the numbers in front of me. I can get that information back to you, but maybe Kristen does. But in general, it's just been, we haven't necessarily opened the platform up to where administrators have access to it. So right now it gets sent to myself and Kristen, but ultimately we haven't necessarily seen the traffic that would make us think about that it's more than we can take on right now. But ultimately, as soon as I get the email, I quickly review it as far as, the level of response, if it's something that needs to happen immediately. I guess the story, or not a story, but the situation that I frequently highlight is a situation where a bullying incident occurred with a possible peanut allergy, where some students were making fun of or trying to, I don't know. I mean, I guess, put a student in a really, really dire situation with, they actively knew about the peanut allergy and were trying to do something about it. And once we knew about it and we knew that it was going to be a class or a session that they took the next day, I called the principal. I was actually not here. I was in a conference in Indianapolis and talked to the principal. They were able to address it right away. And I feel like those are some of the success stories that we're seeing from it. We obviously need to communicate the information out there more and get it out to students. I know that Miriam, when we first did an interview for it, she wasn't aware of the actual process. And so we have to, do a better job of getting the information out there. But I would say, as of right now, it's been a success. I would say on the sexual harassment side, we haven't necessarily seen as many responses. It's been more focused on kind of general bullying harassment. But I'm hopeful as we continue through this process, we'll see some more stuff.
Yeah, I was at a DPO meeting where a parent expressed concerns about the anonymous nature of it. Have you had any false reports or anything like that? A parent expressed a possibility that the anti-bullying could be used as a way of bullying since it's anonymous.
No, not really. I think that sometimes Kristen will be testing the system, and I'll freak out and run over there and try to figure out what's going on. But other than that, we've looked at each of the issues, and I wouldn't say there's been anything that students have been abusing the system in any type of way. So.
I'm going to interrupt, but can we sit?
Yeah, you can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The last thing I would add is one of the things I didn't get a chance to put in the memo, because again, it's still a work in progress, and I like to talk about things that are works in progress and not necessarily coming to fruition, is Diane and I have been working on the multicultural and gender fair aspect of the curriculum. And so I know that JP may know some, or Director Crossan may know something about this as far as how we have looked at multicultural and gender fair throughout our district, and now we're trying to develop a more inclusive curriculum, and I can share that information with you as well. We're basing that on the Teaching Tolerance Anti-Bias curriculum. I apologize, I'm sick right now, and so it's hard for me to talk. And this curriculum, this curriculum in general is focused on diversity, action, justice, and identity. And so looking at it not just necessarily from just a 7th and 9th perspective or a 9th through 12 perspective, but through an entire K-12 system. But as you know, this is my first time working on building a curriculum, and so it's taking some time. We started initially during the summer, but we haven't necessarily really done a lot of the work that I feel like we could do. But obviously that information I can share with you. You can see where we're at from that standpoint.
I was just going to say that, as we spoke last night in our board retreat, that we're really trying to have a concerted effort on our board's part for our own ongoing education and learning. And I don't have a trimester to spend, but I would really like to see either perhaps at one of our education committee meetings or work session that maybe we have a kind of an in-depth run through the syllabus of the class we're looking at to give us at least some sort of depth on that, so we know what's happening there. And I think it's important for us to, kind of lead the way. I mean, we need to learn. As the student said, it's not just for minority students, and I don't think it's just for students either. I think we all have a lot to learn in this area of how we got to where we are now. And I would like to at least have some taste of that educational opportunity myself.
Can I ask, a clarifying question? So Kingsley's course that he's offering is through a volunteer from the university. Are you now giving us a direction to create an elective within our school system that I should add to the program of studies? Because we're going to be registering here in January for next year. So are we asking to add an elective on ethnic studies that I should put in the program of studies and get kids to register for next school year? Or are we going to see how this course goes, or what's the new direction?
Because we're happy to do whatever, but I think we took the direction of the integration, and I think, first of all, we recognize the student voice is critically important, right? And so they've shared this with us numerous times, and we've really tried to respond and follow that board direction. And I think we knew that although that conversation we had at the Ed Committee was good and fruitful, and there was some direction given, that there was still a need for more, right? And that's why Kingsley's continued to work and try to provide another opportunity about a potential elective class. But to Diane's point, if there's further direction you want us to take on creation of a course that all students would take or something like that, I do think it'd be good to come back and probably have another conversation about that, because that will impact graduation requirements, and there's just several things I think we would want to think about how we incorporate that and what that's going to look like. So if that's what you'd like to do, I think we should just probably have another I would ask that we have another conversation about it and kind of go through this memo again and talk about all those implications. So to her point, we're going to continue to incorporate these. Teacher quality monies are always allocated late in the summer, early in the fall, and we get those out to the buildings. So that's why that work had started now. In the spring, all those monies had been allocated out. So we pulled the teacher team together over the summer and started that work here and tried to incorporate those units. Like it says there, we still have work to do about including administrators, students into that conversation once we have a framework to go from. But Kingsley's worked on the side to also provide this additional opportunity. So we'll do whatever you ask, but I just think there's probably some broader implications of that we'd want to come back, have the students with us, talk about, their interest, their need, and then have us explain, some of the, I guess, other things we would need to cross as we talk about that.
Would that be better done at like a work session?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable creating a new graduation requirement from the board table right now at all. But I do think, this feels like the way we're heading. I think what Kingsley's doing with kind of volunteer, but I think as we're thinking about this, I think I would fully support a long-term goal and a further conversation about how do we make this a requirement, how does this fit into what we're already doing, because it's not as if this wouldn't count as world history or whatever else the state requires, right? We can craft that. So, but I think I mean, this is something I wanted a decade ago, is a class exactly like this. I was thinking more from a lit standpoint and getting some really robust, my point at that time was African American literature, specifically stuff that was written here. But I think, so that's kind of where I'm at. I certainly wouldn't make anything from here to make it happen and say this is required, in 4 years. But I love to see that work session.
I just want to follow up. I'm on board with not making the decision right here at the table because that's not how we operate here. But I would like to have further the conversation because I don't think that everything was really tied up at our education committee on where we really wanted to head with this. At least that was the impression I got, especially when I re-listened to it. And we talked, and maybe I'm just missing hearing it, but we talked a lot at that education committee about the junior high level too. And if we're talking elective at the high school level, then we're missing kind of, I think, part of that conversation we had at the education committee where we wanted every student to go through this. And as we talked at our board retreat last night, and previous ones, part of what we have decided on this board is that we want to have students when they leave this district be ready for the world or, whatever's thrown at them. And I think this is one piece of that puzzle to make them ready, ready for this, to be a productive citizen outside of the school district.
I'm really with you, Paul. I think it needs to start, I'd start even younger, but absolutely in 7th grade when we have sort of these delineated courses.
Well, and as I remember too, when we were having that first discussion, one of the reasons for doing it at the junior high level was trying to get before opinions and things were set that way to start that discussion early.
So we have an education committee coming up in December. Can this be an agenda item in that committee and talk about next steps and getting ourselves organized for future work sessions and that kind of thing? Because clearly there's a lot of support for this from the board, both from our retreats, from the presentations from students. Again, thank you so much for your continued advocacy for this important work, the work that Kingsley and others, Diana, are working on this. And so I think the support is here, and we just need to begin working our way through a process where we can very carefully implement this in a way that's sustainable and meeting the broad needs of our district. So we'll add that to our education committee agenda for December, and we'll keep the process moving forward.
Does that timing work for you? That's in 2 weeks, I think. December 19th, I think.
19th.
Oh. Council meeting.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you all so much. That was a great conversation. Really appreciate that. Moving into the operational work portion of the agenda, the first item up is SBRC, application for increased enrollment.
I would like to take the next two together if I could, but they will need separate motions. Both are driven by our certified enrollment process. The first one, the application for enrollment increased enrollment, provides us the spending authority to serve the additional students of about 216 students, more than we had last year on our certified enrollment. The second one, enrollment beyond 5 years in the ELL program, is just simply that, those students that are beyond that, based upon our enrollment data that's been entered. So it's pretty much a mathematical formula driven by the state off of the certified enrollment process. And it's something that we experience every year at this same time.
This is a routine process for a growing school district because the school aid formula doesn't provide on-time funding. It's always a year behind. We need to educate those kids this year. We need the resources this year. And so we've always applied for this advanced increase in enrollment in order for us to do that. So,
I move that the Board of Directors of the Iowa City Community School District approve the SBRC application for modified supplemental amount for fiscal year 2018, increased enrollment in the amount of $1,442,428.
Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And is there a motion for the second?
The Board of Directors of the Iowa City, I move that the Board of Directors of the Iowa City Community School District approves the SBRC application for modified supplemental amount for ELL instruction beyond 5 years for the 2017-18 school year in the amount of $282,205.
I second it.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
The next item has to do with board resolution authorizing issuance of bonds, appointment of paying agent, and approval of tax exemption and continuing disclosure certificates. I believe we've got a number of resolutions in this mix here, 4 of them, I believe. Is there some context we should have before we move into that?
These are just a series of documents that have been drafted by Beth Grobe at Allers and Cooney. They're the standard documents whenever you issue bonds. One motion can be done to accept all of these resolutions on this one. So, but those are the standard documents for the bonds.
Do we need to specify the details of the resolutions in our motion?
That would probably be a good process.
Okay,
It's
I'll
a mouthful.
take a stab at it. I move that we, the Board of the Iowa City School District, approve the following resolutions. Resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation school bonds, Series 2017C of the Iowa City Community School District, State of Iowa, in the amount of $58,995,000 and levying a tax for the payment thereof. Also, a resolution that we, in the form of tax exemption certificate, be placed on file and approved, and also that the form of continuing disclosure certificate be placed on file and approved, and that we appoint Bankers Trust Company of Des Moines to serve as the paying agent, bond registrar, and transfer agent, approving the paying agent, bond registrar, and transfer agent agreement, and authorizing the execution of same.
I'll second that.
Before you vote, could I ask Lisa if she would correct the amount? I believe you said $58,995,000. It should be $58,955,000.
Thank you.
For the record.
Okay, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. The next item is the Facilities Master Plan. This topic is going to be discussing an option for acceleration of the plan. We, as a board, have discussed this at a couple of board meetings, also a work session. We've spent some time on this, looking at options, getting information from administration, talking about pros and cons, and I think tonight we're looking to put put forward motions on the acceleration plan.
I move we approve the accelerated facility master plan as presented in the board packet with a formal 6-month review to ensure the plan remains aligned with district priorities.
I second.
Comments, questions, points that people would like to make?
I did write out some comments, so I'm going to share them because I took the time to write them out. I strongly believe in the facility master plan and the benefits it will have as a district as a whole. It's no secret that the steering committee laid out projects in a very specific order. You were either pre-bond or post-bond. Projects that were pre-bond were done to address some immediate needs and to show the community that we could finish projects on time and on or under budget. Projects that were post-bond were spread out across the district so that everyone in the district had a reason to vote for passage of the bond. Last winter, when the board was discussing the GO bond and whether or not to go all in for the total amount or to split it up into 2 smaller bonds, I stood firm in my belief that we should go all in. I didn't come to that decision easily, as the thought of passing a smaller bond would likely be a slightly easier task than the one we were facing. Directors at the table made some great arguments for why we should actually go for 2 smaller bonds at our work session, and it made me think to myself, maybe they're right, 2 bonds is the way to go. But I kept coming back to 3 things that pointed me towards the full bond. The first were the facility master plan conversations that I had with community members during 2013's planning meetings, conversations during my campaigns, as well as conversations after I was elected. Numerous people had talked about why projects were where they were and why we couldn't do things faster, especially if we had the money to do it. The second thing I kept coming back to was, regardless of boundaries or other factors, we have a need to update our buildings. And adding rooms to existing facilities would be used, if not for full classrooms, for something else. We can always use the space in the schools. If there was space, it was going to be used by the building. And finally, we had one shot to ask the people to go all in and commit to the education in this community. If we had went for smaller bonds, there was no guarantee that the projects on the second bond would get passed as well, and we would have missed our one shot to do that. Now we're at a point where we have a chance to say yes to accelerating the full plan versus a small portion of the plan. I feel as if I'm in the same position as I was during those bond discussions. Beginning in the spring, I started going to PTA, PTO, DPO meetings where we gave presentations on the GO bond. I probably did more than 20 presentations to different groups, including those school groups. And I had countless interactions with community members, ranging from the farmer's market to the workplace to door knocking. It was very common when we were at schools where they were towards the end to ask 2 questions. Why are we last? For example, at Lemmy, I got that a lot. And is there any way we can get this done sooner? And I thought, and though I didn't keep an exact list of every individual that asked me about moving projects up, I can say it was a lot. And it ranged from Lemmy to Alexander to Liberty to Kirkwood and everywhere within the boundaries of the ICCSD. Every time I did a presentation, I can almost guarantee that one of those questions were asked. And every time I asked Steve, Craig, or Dwayne if there was a way to get more projects done quicker, the answer was always no, because we could only manage to do 3 or 4 projects at a time. And you can ask them, I talked to them a lot about the bond, and they probably didn't care to see my face or hear my voice about it as much as they did. Acceleration answers those questions for everyone. We can get things done sooner. We can get our spaces updated, and we can get our kids into those spaces sooner. People are also very concerned with the price tag of the bond and the effect it would have on their property taxes. Accelerating the bond will save the taxpayers money, and we are already seeing the benefits of the savings when we sold our first bonds for these projects. If we were looking to save anywhere from $4 to $15 million, even $1 million, any savings really, for the taxpayers, I don't think we should balk or hesitate at doing so. As for those people that are concerned that we're going to have to hire extra staff, we're going to have to do that if we agree to move up Tate and Alexander, as it sounds like most of us have already decided that that's something we want to do. I think the extra staff, as I said, that work session could be a real positive, especially if we look down the road and start to consider succession plans or whatnot. Director Eystone made a great point the other night that he said if this was a row of dominoes, forgive me if I butcher this, if it was a row of dominoes, why don't we just take that 6th domino out and just knock down the first 5? And I think really what we're arguing here on both sides is that we do have that row of dominoes, and instead of taking one out before we start, I'd like to leave all the dominoes in and knock it down, and when we get to that 6th one or that 7th one or 8th one, if we have to pull it out, then we can do that. I say we commit to the accelerated plan, let the administration begin doing the work they need to do, and by no means am I saying that we just wipe our hands off and say, here you go, run with it. We as the board will still continue to monitor the progress, and if we need to slow down, we can do that. If we need to say, I think both sides want to accelerate, it's just a matter of saying we commit to it. I've heard that we say if we accelerate, we're losing our flexibility. I honestly don't think that's the case here. Where we have the flexibility is when we're planning these new spaces, and that's where we want to have it. When we have the team of experts, the principals, the teachers, they come together and start planning out the spaces and how they'll be used and what they'll be used for. That's the flexibility. For example, keeping Lemmy in 2023 or moving up to 2020, I can tell you right now it doesn't change that they're in need of a gym, a music room, and an art room. How you use that extra space that's freed up from the old music room or the art room is your flexibility piece. I think once again we are looking at splitting or going all in on the facility master plan. This time, though, we have the luxury of knowing that we have the money to complete the projects. I say we vote to accelerate tonight so that all the people on the back half, or those that were not in the first wave of acceleration, also know that we are committed to them. Although the term no-brainer was used numerous times while discussing projects like Alexander or Tate, I think all the projects are no-brainers. We already went to the community, asked their approval. They overwhelmingly voted to support the plan and pass the bond. We've already heard from schools involved that the projects at their schools are important to them. Let's get these projects done. Let's get these projects done at an accelerated pace if possible. I also know from all those interactions that there are more issues that we need to address. Steve and I did a presentation at Hills. Trust me, the Hills community was very vocal about not being on this bond. We have Trek. We know we're going to need another elementary or two in the north. We know that we're going to need to go back and look at schools like Twain or Corville Central, where work has already been done, but there's still pressing needs there now. Voting to accelerate this entire plan is reinforcing our support for this facility master plan. Commit to those at the end of the plan and show them they're just as important as the schools that come before them. Sorry, that was long, but it is.
We're just going to go down the line here. That was well said, Paul. I stood at that microphone when the board was discussing whether or not to go with one bond or break it up, and I advocated at the time that I thought one bond was the way to go, and I never wavered from that. I have always been a strong proponent of the facilities master plan as a whole, and the bond in my mind was just the way we were going to pay for it. And 11 weeks ago tonight, I celebrated alongside of a bunch of other people when the voters of this district said, we overwhelmingly want to spend the money on our schools. And that was great, and I was very excited to see that. And at the time, we said, hey, that's enough. We've got all of these great buildings in our plan, and now we can pay for it, and we can promise or come through on what we've promised this whole time. As I, have gotten feedback from those around the community, I'm reminded of something I've always said, and then actually somebody said it to me at a workshop at our school board convention, was that perception is reality. And the perception of this accelerated plan as a whole coming so quickly on the heels of that vote smells funny to people. I don't have that particular problem with it. I'm not going to throw out conspiracies. This is where it came from. But I will say that without just kind of taking a step back and taking a breath on it, it looks like we're just jumping all in on something without really spending the time and being able to adapt to some of the changes. And I said it at our work session, and I have not changed my mind. I am in favor of acceleration, and I am perfectly willing to get the ball rolling on the projects that are listed first on there, but I am not willing tonight to say I'm in favor of just the plan itself. I don't think that going that route precludes us from accepting all the rest of it at a later date. And part of the motion was a review 6 months out. I think that can still happen, and it will either say, yep, the next set of buildings on the plan are fine, or it might say, hey, they're not fine. And so I guess we're sort of splitting hairs at this point on, going all in or going partially in. I would not be in favor of not going in at all, but if we can still, in 6 months' time, reevaluate and still have a plan that works, with, temporaries that have to move around and things like that, and we're still meeting the needs that are current at that time. I think the timing of the kind of the enrollment, well, no, it's not the enrollment, but the student analysis thing in March, I believe, is a vital piece to that. And I feel like we're kind of wading in instead of jumping in, and that would be my preference tonight.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. I think my experience after having that celebration on the bond and then getting this all at once, it just felt like a lot. And then when I look at the timeline of projects, I know that me as an individual, I have to be able to monitor my ability to really give things the amount of work. I'm with you. I can really see these first, 4 projects here, and then obviously, getting going on the City High design phase and having that community conversation. I think we've said it before as no-brainers. I'm sure Dwayne sees a whole bunch of other no-brainers in here, and they may be. And but I'm as a board member, I'm going to have to learn that on my own, and I can't just take somebody's word. As good as it is, and as good a job you do, as a board member, I feel better about doing my due diligence, taking this in chunks, and it may well end up being all accelerated exactly as it is on this plan, but I don't see any harm. I am also very much in favor of hiring someone else to help move these projects forward. I think there's a lot of good things that come from that. I think we can pay for that out of the bond money. I think that's great. I think we can train somebody up for when Dwayne decides to go surfing in Florida or something. So I think those are some valuable things, and so I would be very much in favor of moving forward this first chunk, and then actually very much forcing us to review that as we move forward with the rest of these projects.
So continuing with going down the line, a few thoughts on my part. I support the accelerated plan, and I support the motion as it's been presented, and for me, the salient point in the motion is the 6-month review, because as a board, we have the opportunity to take pause, get the input from the student potential analysis, the design work that's been done to date, and decide, do we need to make a change to the accelerated plan, stay the course, make some tweaks, change. We have that authority to make a change, and so I'm therefore believing that committing to the accelerated plan is the right thing, so that there's no uncertainty in the district on whether other projects are going to be accelerated or not. I want to commit to the acceleration. I want to put the proper governance checks in place by the board with input from administration, and actively manage this work as we go through it with the commitment to an accelerated plan. I had the wonderful opportunity with some of the other board members to attend the ISB convention a couple weeks ago, and it was a great opportunity because I got to meet lots of administrators and board members from all over the state. And one of the things that was really striking to me was, first of all, people were like, wow, you're from Iowa City. Iowa City is unique. And we're unique in a number of ways. One, we have a fantastic community that's super engaged. All of you are here tonight making your voices known. That is unique in our state for many districts, and want to thank you for that. Another area that we're really unique is we are growing. So many districts that I talked with, they are shrinking. They're facing challenges of sharing superintendents, closing schools, consolidating. They have a whole different set of challenges from a really rapidly growing district as we have here in Iowa City, the community school district. And with that growth, I know I've heard lots of folks say, boy, I'm tired of talking about facilities. I want to move on to what's happening in the classroom. With the wonderful discussion around SOD and the curriculum points. But it's our duty to make sure that our facilities are maintaining pace with the growth of this district. And we, I believe, need to consider continuing the acceleration. The students are going to continue to come. We need to continue to build capacity. We need to continue to deliver the plan that's been approved through the bond and the language that was associated with it. We already have a backlog of projects that are not part of FMP. You mentioned Hills, you mentioned the new elementary. We don't know where else we're going to need to add capacity, but we know we're going to have to do it. Accelerating not only saves us money, it gets through the current plan, and then allows us to address those needs that we know we already have. Therefore, I think committing to the accelerated plan makes sense with the caveat that we as a leadership team are going to continue to monitor, manage, oversee in a 6-month interim, maybe even more frequently if we need to. We have that authority. We can make things, we can slow down, we can accelerate. Approving the full accelerated plan tonight does not take away any of our authority to manage this actively throughout the process. And so I'm very, very supportive of the full acceleration and the commitment that we would be demonstrating as a board to the growing needs of our district.
Going down the line, I will say I don't know that I disagree with anything that anybody said tonight. I think Sean is right in that we're sort of splitting hairs. That there's, what I'm hearing from the board and what I heard at the work session is that there's a lot of agreement with getting our projects done faster. It's just a matter of whether we commit to the plan as is right now with a 6-month pause, or we build in a mandatory pause. And I am of the position at this point where I'm just not ready to go ahead without the mandatory pause. I have a number of reasons for feeling that way, some of which I shared at the work session, but I sometimes feel like we get ahead of ourselves, and then the board is asked to make decisions very quickly, and I feel as though putting in a mandatory pause would force us to review things ahead of time and not let things get away from us. And I don't know that there's a big difference, because we may, as Sean said, end up doing everything exactly as the plan is. I'm just not comfortable committing to that 100% tonight. I would like to have a more robust conversation, and I would feel best if that were just built into the motion beyond just a planned pause.
Well, going down the line, I hate to get in front of Ruthina, but I'll go ahead and say I will be a voice in opposition to the acceleration. I look at Alexander as our first building on the FMP, and we didn't predict the future very well with that. It has, 4 temporaries, looking for more, and we're adding classrooms. I think accelerating this without having a serious discussion on boundaries is putting the cart before the horse. Also, I have real concerns with the length of the bond discussion with the public, and then this coming, we're saying it was the acceleration plan was created on October 4th. I requested correspondence from the stakeholders that were able to get the administration team to go through all this work and present it to us before the board was really brought up to speed on it. And none was provided. We had RFPs going out to countless firms for 5 projects, and I've asked for life cycle costs on playground surfaces for months and still haven't received them. So I've got real concerns with that. In this acceleration, there's been no discussion on what we were going to do for the special ed needs, what we will do for career and technical, and it doesn't meet the requirement set by the new board members when they were campaigning, saying 3 readings on major policy changes, and we have had limited community comment at community comment is the only community opportunity for input. I've received a lot of emails, but a lot of them wouldn't pass a English teacher's muster for the fact that they were original. Many are scripted. Also, we are not allowing our community their right to cast a ballot on the Hoover decision, because we will just push this past and we will take that away from them. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. definitely we have needs. We've got to push these needs and get these things done. I just feel that this has been rushed upon us. We haven't been brought up to speed on it, and I have real concerns that we're going to spend this money and the public is going to look, that's it. I have concerns with that. We're rushing ahead, and we still have, there's still issues with the Lincoln project. So I am not in support of the acceleration model at all.
So, not sure if what I'm going to say is going to really have an effect on, if you're listening, you could probably do the math of where this may land, but I will just throw my 2 cents out there. I think a couple of people have raised some interesting points. From my standpoint, back on September 12th, we heard clearly from our community. They're in full support of this plan. The acceleration does not change that plan. The biggest thing for me as a board member and a community member, it saves our taxpayers money. And for me, as we're thinking forward and of those projects that's not included in here, I want to be able to go to the community and realize and say to them that when you trusted us with $191.5 million, we took that to heart and considered all of our options to save you as much money, to show that we're trustworthy enough for the other projects that we know we will have to accomplish. There's a lot of concerns with whether it's a planned pause or recommended pause. I think the way the motion is on the table right now, it says it's a 6 months review. So in 6 months, we would come back, and as President Godwin mentioned, we have the authority in 6 months to put forward another motion to say, at this time, I'm not comfortable with moving forward with the rest of the acceleration plan, because we will have more information from Craig and Dwayne on how things are progressing, what type of savings, hopefully, I'm assuming we should be able to have some of those numbers at that point, if we're seeing the benefit that we all agreed to tonight. I doubt if that made any impact, but I am a firm supporter of what the over 65% of the community entrusted in us on September 12th, moving forward this original plan. Because as I stated last night, facilities discussion, as much as we all want it to stop, never stops. We're a growing district. Whether we're looking at boundaries or we need facilities, regardless of where we're putting kids. We're going to have facility needs. And so to use that as crutches or dependence on whether or not we make decisions, I'm not comfortable in doing that, because I know regardless of what happens, we haven't seen any data to say that we don't need our facilities. We may need different type of facilities, and right now we have a specific plan in place that we need to move forward.
Just a couple of questions or clarifications maybe. I am in the same mindset as Ruthina that 6 month is meant to be that mandatory pause, planned pause. I mean, I just said I was a little confused on the difference between the two, because basically what I'm saying is that the 6 month time is when we stop and take a look, and if we have to take, as Sean said, that 6 domino out, then we take it out and stop. That's what that's meant to be. Just refresh my memory, Steve. Alexander opened in what year?
2015.
And, okay, what, 14, right?
14.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
sorry.
Then the weighted resource allocation model was approved by the board in what year?
That was 14.
For effect in
15.
15. So we had already built the school.
Excuse me, Steve. It was 15. We
Right.
started in 13.
Oh, I'm losing my mind, Dwayne.
Yeah.
So we changed policy after the school was already pretty much built and done, and how we were going to address that school. So, I mean, I understand Phil's point, but I think it's a little off, because we didn't build the school wrong, we just changed policy.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your point.
Also, to your point about special education not being included, that's that comes into play in the design phase. I mean, that's part of, when you talk about the buildings, right, you talk about how the spaces are going to be used and what's going to be in the building. So to say that special education is not covered, I think that's a little unfair. And then just finally, my last point also is that you mentioned 3 readings and how that was four board members campaigned on that. Well, just because you campaigned on something doesn't mean it goes into effect once you're elected. That's a policy change that we have to go through the steps to make happen before we do that. And I'm just saying that's hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, well, I agree. Just because you campaign on something doesn't mean it actually happens. And also with regards to the RAM model, you know, do we really, we are young into it. We're seeing the district is showing some small growth, but the Iowa assessments have gone down. So let's, you know, I'm a big supporter of weighted resource allocation and those with the most need getting it, but I think the acceleration of this is, we don't, like I said before, I don't think we predict the future very well.
One comment on that. It's tough to predict the future, I completely agree, but we have a set of projects that were approved on the ballot, and we can't vary from what those projects are, the scope, what's happening at each building. So we've already done our planning and predicted what we need. We codified it on our ballot. We had voters vote on it. What we're discussing tonight is taking that plan and deciding whether or not we want to execute on it faster than the original timeline. So I take a little bit of, with that, can't predict the future. I think we've already got a plan in place that we are legally bound to execute on. So I know, Dwayne, you want to make some comments.
Yeah, I just had a point of clarification. I appreciate the 6-month comment. I think I'd like to put more definition in that, because I like to get the design process started before people go home for summer break. And if we're going to start the design process in early 18 for 19, assuming that you go ahead with that 6th domino or whatever decision you make, it would be my request that that decision be made at the first meeting in May, which is approximately 6 months from now. It's one meeting short of 6 months, because that allows us to get started before school's out and summer gets here and people get busy. So that way we can get the design work done for the start of 19. That would be my request.
Dwayne, I have a question. If this motion fails and a motion to start this first 4 projects passes, at what point are you going to come back to us with the next acceleration phase? Would that be about the same time frame?
Right. That was my assumption, that it would be that first meeting in May. You'll have your demographics back. You'll have time to discuss that, and you'll know where the current direction of the district is. So.
And I just want to make one comment, because I don't want to belabor this, because I think we do know the math. But, and it's not about predicting the future, but I also think we're going to have some really major discussions that may change the way things look. And we have to complete all the projects, but the specificity may change. Some of the specificity may, and maybe it won't, but some of the things might change depending on some of the conversations we have around paired schooling, magnets, whatever. That might affect some of the specific design details, and that's what I don't want. I don't, and maybe this won't happen, but I don't want to create this policy and then we say, well, we can't possibly do that educational idea because we don't have the facilities. And that's, for me, putting the cart before the horse a little bit, and I may be totally wrong. And 6 months from now, I'll know a lot more than I know today about how that looks and how our facilities need to match what's going on educationally in our buildings. And I know, for me personally, I just want that knowledge. I want that knowledge base. I want to know it, and I want to, be able to trust that.
And I appreciate, you're responsible for the program. My job is to get the facilities built. And my only caution would be that we had a pretty definite scope of the projects in the bond program that just passed, and to deviate too far from that would be kind of a hazardous thing to do.
Well, and I wouldn't want to deviate far from that. I certainly don't want to betray the trust of the voters that approved that bond. Absolutely.
I'm just going to make one final comment. I don't think we're changing anybody's mind at this point, but both Paul and Jan have said, that the voting on the full acceleration plan shows a commitment to the plan, and I guess that sort of assumes that if you don't, you're not showing a commitment. And I just want to say that I feel that my support of the bond in general shows that I'm committed to it. As Janet said, it's a finite list of projects and schools, and it's already defined. And, you know, when you have a plan like this, I think it was Janet again at our work session, you've got scope, you've got budget, and you've got time. And that's what was in that vote that we had on the bond. And two of them are kind of locked in, and we're looking at the third one changing, right? That's really what we're looking at. And, you know, I'm still committed to getting all of these projects done. I'm very committed to getting kids into renovated classrooms as soon as we can, but I want to make sure that we're just doing it smart. And like I said, I'm not precluding, you know, future votes from happening, and I'm more than willing to move ahead with some of our first stuff. I think as an approval on a plan to then say 6 months from now we can totally change it, then why are we approving it past 6 months? That doesn't make sense in my head. If I'm comfortable with the stuff that we have now ahead of us, and then I'm comfortable with looking at it again in 6 months and making another determination. And that just, I think we're still holding true to all of the folks that voted either way on the bond, right? We're still going to follow through and get these projects done because that's what we promised we were going to do. And we're still going to be fiscally responsible and common sense responsible as we do it. And I think that's serving everybody. And I think starting today with an approval of an entire plan of acceleration, I think softens that commitment a little bit myself. I'm done.
I guess we're saying the same thing. What I'm saying with the commitment to the plan, obviously we are going to do the things. What I'm saying is when you talk to Wickham, Northwest, Garner, Kirkwood, Horn, Liberty Phase 3, Lemmy, and Borlaug, we're saying, you know what? You guys are just as important as Tate and Alexander and Southeast and North Central and the design phase for City High. We're going to go ahead and you know, if everything is on pace, we're going to move you up as well. Should we have to pause and back it down one or two of those things, then, you know, that may happen too. But I'm just, you know, I think what we're arguing is the same thing. It's just we're pausing where you want to approve 5, stop, and then look at what we're going to approve next. And what I'm saying, and what our motion is that we want to do all these, if we can, accelerated with the built-in time where we stop and take a look and see if there's things that need to be moved.
I think our process is going to be the same regardless. Whatever the vote is, we're going to, if we approve design phase for the first 5, and we don't have that motion on the table, we need to work on the other one first, but say this first one fails and we take that one up, I think our process is going to be the same. We're going to get the student potential analysis. We're already kicking off boundary work. We have to fulfill the projects on the FMP. We know we're going to stop and take a pause and decide whether we kick off the next phase work. I actually think our work will be the same, regardless if we go with this vote or potentially a different one. But Steve, want to open it to you. Do you have any comments you want to make before we open up to vote?
First of all, I'd just express my appreciation of the board for the deep dialogue on it. We've had a lot of conversation both at the board table and at the work sessions, and it's been very objective and very focused on the process, and I really appreciate that. I think it's really helped us move this forward in a relatively short period of time. I would like to echo that the process, as was mentioned before, time being the variable that's available to us as we look at the scope and the budget. And just to reiterate, I guess, for people out in the general public, we have a finite set of resources available to us in terms of people in the district. And the challenge to compressing these projects in the past has always been our ability to manage more than 4 projects at once. And Craig was able to get an opinion from the folks that do our bond work that it's permissible under state statutes to use bond proceeds to fund construction management positions. And so that gives us a little bit of flexibility and understanding that beefing up our capacity internally then allows us to handle more projects. And so that will be part of this process, and certainly that's something that we can afford to do only because of the acceleration. It generates the funds inside the system to allow us to hire the staff to manage those extra positions.
Further comments?
I got one quick question for my clarity. Just looking at the accelerator plans, is the West High Phase 2 already been approved to be accelerated? Because it's got the little line, you know, the little design thing on moved ahead.
Actually, when we hired the design firm to do West High Phase 1, we also hired them to do West High Phase 2. So we've already started the design work, but we will not the schedule will not move up. It'll be as defined in the previous plan.
So if we were to
Let me clarify better. City High and West High, both are scheduled to start in 2019, and that hasn't changed. We have started the design work for West High because the design team was in place. What we're asking for is to just accelerate the design for City High a little bit.
So if we were to make a motion second to this, if it fails, we would need to include City and West?
No, because West has already been authorized, in my mind.
That's my question.
Right, yeah.
West is already...
Yeah, I was just trying to give you some clarity that design was authorized, in my mind, when we did Phase 1, because that same design team is following through. Okay. Does that help?
Yep.
Yep.
If there are no further comments, Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion fails with Directors Rotland, Clausen, Eystone, and Hemingway voting nay, and Directors Ressler, Godwin, and Malone voting yea.
I will ask the board if there's another motion that we'd like to consider.
I move that we accept the acceleration of Alexander, Tate, Southeast, North Central, and City High as presented in the plan.
I'll second that.
Discussion, comments?
Just one quick comment that I forgot in the last one. Sorry, back to you, Phil. The people that contacted us via email, regardless if it was a form email or not, I think to disregard that they actually took the time to send us the email, and their support was kind of wrong, in my opinion.
No.
So.
I'm just saying that it was structured and it was formed, but I am not stating that their concerns are not genuine. I'm just saying that it was...
I appreciate the clarification because that's the way it came off to me, at least. So.
I was just stating that I don't think a English teacher would approve it as original. That was my...
I understand. But what I'm saying is the process of things like this, people do that all the time.
We get it many times that we get essentially form emails from people sharing the same view.
Yep.
I'd just like to clarify before we vote. If this motion should pass, could we review the next set of projects prior to May?
Absolutely.
Start that process
Sure.
soon?
Yeah, my thought was it'd be nice if you could approve it in the first meeting in May so we can move forward, but certainly the discussion should take place before that.
Mm-hmm. When will we have the student analysis survey?
Yeah, first of March.
Okay.
And then looking at this, what would be the next ones that we would need to approve in May if we were to accelerate? Would it just be Shimmick and Wood? And Garner?
Shimmick, Wood, and Garner, that's
yes.
Correct. Assuming it doesn't change. I mean, it could potentially change based on the information we get or how things are going, or, I think that's what we're saying is that it's not locked in.
No, the only one that's kind of critical is the transition of the sixplex, so I have to keep that in mind. So certainly I think Shimmick has some pretty severe needs when compared to Wood and Garner, Wood more than Garner. So that's why I'll present it to you. I'll give you what their needs are in those buildings.
And I appreciate that, and you heard what I said last week about Kirkwood as well.
Sure.
And the need for preschool rooms there, with there being a lack of enough seats in Coralville for school-based preschool.
Right. So I think your choice is the order of Shimmick and Kirkwood, because they both are going to need a sixplex.
I just would be very cautious when we get to that stage of moving schools behind other schools, just because the plan as laid out when people voted kind of went in order as well on that bond language.
Although we've already really changed the order.
I know.
Dayton Alexander, so it's...
And again, that's where I was saying that when we use the phrase no-brainers, they're all no-brainers because they all need to be done.
Well, that's true.
Other discussion, comment, questions? Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. That was a very robust discussion. I appreciate everyone's input on that. Moving on to asset disposal process. Is this Craig, Steve?
Sure, you've got a standard operating procedure that's included as an attachment in the board doc. You'll notice, in board docs, you'll notice at the top, implementation date was August of 2012. So this has been in place now for approximately 5 years. And I'd offer Craig and Dwayne the opportunity to provide any input before we answer questions for you.
We did receive a request for information earlier this morning from Director Hemingway that having a full slate of meetings today, we weren't able to get those responded to. But in general, there's some things that is probably something that the board would need to know about our disposal process. First of all, when we bring things into the school district, we have a threshold of $2,500 where we would either capitalize that item or just put it into production, more or less. When you capitalize an item, you tag it for identification, you put it on your inventory list, and you move that forward in that vein. Otherwise, the item is just put into production like a student desk or a chair. Doesn't even come close to that threshold. And so those items aren't tagged, they're not identified individually, and those kind of things that move through the process. And so you have to be discerning as to what that capitalization threshold is in order for us on the back end, when something wears out, how you deal with it. Okay, the law says that we can actually go up to a capitalization level of $5,000, but we, in consultation with our auditors, use that $2,500 threshold because we feel like we're able to capture the items that we need for identification at that level. If you go too high, you basically don't identify anything for capitalization. And so there's a balance there, and it's more of an applied science than it is an exact science, okay, in that particular area. But our threshold is $2,500. Just to give you a scope of what we deal with, we went back and ran a report today on how many requests for withdrawing items from our buildings we received at our facility maintenance this last fiscal year. So we did a search between July 1 of 16 and June 30th of 17, and we ended up with over 1,067 requests, work orders, to withdraw multiple items from the buildings. And any one of those work orders could have been multiple items. One, you just go through the list, 47 boxes of this stuff, or whatever it might be. That's our process. We have a standard operating procedure in place. When a building wants to get rid of something that they don't need anymore, whether it's an old textbook or whether it's an old band instrument or whatever it might be, a desk or a chair or something that's broken, they tell their head custodian about it. The head custodian puts in a work order, and then that work order goes to our delivery folks, and they go out and pick it up. They bring it back to the warehouse. And what happens to it then is a pretty scripted process as well. We inventory a lot of stuff, but we don't have unlimited space, all right? So if something is broken or if something is obviously never going to be used again, we transition that particular thing into a pile, and when we get a truckload, I have a standing order with our facility maintenance department that if it's not trash, then we have to determine whether it's broken and it's trash, right? Because trash we can just throw away. But if it's something that might have some intrinsic value to someone, even though we don't use it anymore, we've used Sharpless auctions for that process. We take a truckload out, we drop it off. They advertise as they need to do to the public that these things are coming up for sale. They hold the auction. They take their commission from that consignment during that auction, and then they send us the net check. And along with that net check, they provide us with all of the sales slips of all the things that they've sold for us. It could be 47 chairs for $1 a piece or $2 a piece or whatever it might be. And we get all of those slips, and all of those are they're scanned and they're put into our accounts receivable, accounts payable archive system, okay? We, of course, cash the check. The check goes back into the general fund. Regardless of the item that's being auctioned off, because it's of such minimal value, our auditors tell us that it can go back into the general fund. Typically, when you're working with federal dollars, you need to be careful where those dollars end up if you dispose of something. But almost all of our federal dollars are accounted for through the general fund. So it's a pretty safe assumption on our part that when we dispose of something, that's where it goes. The only thing we have to be careful of is something out of the nutrition fund, so to speak. Let's say we have a steam kettle that is rusted out or we can no longer use or whatever that might be. When you're working with something on an institutional nature like that, we typically scrap that because there's really no market value in an auction setting for something like that. So we follow our standard operating procedures for disposal. That's the kind of operation that we continue to maintain. We do, however, keep a list of all of our custodial equipment on an inventory, whether it's a scrubber or a buffer or those types of things that we have, because those are actually covered by our equipment breakdown policy. And when those things break down, we submit them and that information to the insurance company. They reimburse us for the cost of fixing that item, and we keep it in production, okay? But when they get to a point where it's impossible to repair, let's say they get too old and we can't find parts or whatever it might be, we scavenge the parts off of those items and then we just dispose of the carcass. It's basically parted out, so to speak, and then we sell the scrap metal, and we do that on a fairly regular basis. If you're talking technology, we always inventory technology because that's something that tends to walk off. So we need to manage that inventory pretty carefully. And so we inventory all of our technology. When we have some obsolescence that we want to remove from a classroom, a server or whatever it might be, a TV, we have large boxes down at the facility maintenance department, and we throw it in there. We have a recycle company that actually comes and they mine the silver out of the circuit boards and things like that. We don't pay them, they don't pay us, they just disappear. And that's good for us because we don't want that cost, and yet it's not of any use to us when we do that process. So that gives you kind of an overview of the disposal process of our assets. Vehicles, we typically trade. We don't sell those ourselves. Now, we did have a couple vehicles that were not safe to drive, and so we had to scrap those out here recently. The floorboards were rusted out to the point where they wouldn't pass inspection, and so we couldn't trade those in, or wasn't able to trade those in, so we had to scrap those. But typically we trade vehicles in on new vehicles. We trade old mowers in on new mowers, you know, that kind of thing. So that's how we dispose of those items during that purchase process of a new product. So in general, those are kind of the things that we do in our disposal process and how we follow. So.
Now, early on, when I got on the board, we started a service government sales or something. Have we utilized that service?
Government deals is something that we continue to look at. In fact, we're going to, Jeff Barnes told me today that we plan to actually try and sell something on there. I think it'd be one of our first items that we've been able to deliver.
So we really haven't utilized it before?
We haven't utilized it, but we still have it in our back pocket, and we think we have an application for one now, and we're planning to try that out. And
I'm sorry I didn't submit this one earlier, but do you have an idea? I know we signed a contract with those people for a certain length of time.
Do you?
I don't know. The board did approve the contract. I can't tell you the length of it, but we're actually trying to set up the training to list those out there for sale probably next week.
Okay.
So it should be pretty soon that we'll be able to implement that option.
Okay.
For those type of things.
We can find the length.
And the reason I bring it up is there's a local business that does the very same thing.
Yeah.
Here, Heartland Recovery, that just looking to try and utilize local businesses that are paying our taxes and things of that nature that way. And a concern I have is the surplus equipment from City High, the machine tools and that. Would the board ever be notified with the sale of those, or is that just something that just automatically would get processed?
We don't give you pre-notice, but in our quarterly report every month, we show you the results of the sale of that equipment. And then once a year, you see that also in our annual financial reports as a separate line of what amount of monies we've collected from the disposal of our assets. And so that's how it's communicated to the board. But we don't include you in decisions on whether something is sold or not sold.
That quarterly report that Craig just referred to, it's page 8 of the most recent report on the line that says sale of materials. Okay. You'll notice that we have a $5,000 expected source of revenue there, which represents 0.003% of our overall budget. So this is not a money-making adventure at all.
I understand. And the Perkins money would fall under that federal category you were referring
Perkins
to.
money, yeah. It's a federal dollar. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Most people probably don't care about disposing of assets, but I do that a lot at work. And so I'm just curious, the $5,000 limit for, I think it's got an approval in there or something, is that, I assume that's depreciated value? What kind of depreciation, I assume it ranges for depending on what the stuff that we're depreciating is. I'm just kind of curious as to what that is.
In governmental accounting, we don't depreciate anything except in our enterprise fund, which is our nutrition fund in general. Otherwise, there's not depreciation applied on any kind of official systematic basis. It's the value of the item when it's considered obsolete or we no longer use it. And
basically market value?
Whatever somebody would pay us to take it off our hands, which is typically not very much money.
Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you for that overview. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Moving on to Appendix 9.
Thank you. We have 6 projects and 6 requests this evening. The first one is Liberty High School Athletic Complex. You do have a drawing in your administrative section of your agenda this evening that you can look at if you choose to. And what we're asking you to do is approve the construction documents for that and put that out for bid in January. That you have already approved the consent item step 6, which is the public hearing itself for December 12th. At Main Elementary School, you also have drawings in your packet for what we call design development, or step 4, and all that is showing you more details. You're looking at me like you haven't seen, you know where it's at in your packet in their administration?
Oh, no, yeah, I have it. I'm just...
Okay. I was hoping it was there. That design development is where we start putting a lot more details to the drawing. You know where the actual sizes of the room, where the doors go, where the cabinets go, windows, that type of thing. So there's a lot more detail there than you saw before. It's just truly the development of the design, just one step in the process. Plumbing life cycle, upper level restrooms. This was a 3-year project. We're finishing the upper level. The project has been completed. All the punch list items are resolved, and this action would accept the project and release a $9,000 retainage. On the roof management program, there's a lot of different parts to that, but one part of that was rebuilding the press box at West High School, and we made a request to replace some wiring for the speakers that had been outdated, and that was only a $575 request. Safety and security was the one I had you pull last time. If you recall, I asked you not to vote on it because I didn't have enough information. And what this is a reassignment of a contract from design engineers to Shive Hattery. So you need a little background. When we started security and design, or safety and security, it was really a large multi-year program that we started back in 2013. It was the spring of 2013, as a matter of fact, in April, I remember it well. And we, at that time, split up all the different phases and every school is touched by safety and security, and it's multi-millions. And we split up the design work based on where we thought they were best suited. Well, in this particular case at West High, Shive Hattery is also doing the design work for the actual renovation project and the electrical wiring and those types of things. So design engineers graciously said, we don't really need to be involved with that project. It should be given to West High. So what we're asking you to do is reassign the contract from design engineers to Shive Hattery. So it's a modification of the contract. We call it step 2. And then the last one is West High School renovation. It's a change request for $28,867. Part of this is we have to put in a fire suppression hood in the family and consumer science room, request of the fire marshal. And then we requested that an emergency alarm system be put in the front office. And there were some unforeseen issues regarding piping around the chiller and a roof drain that needed to be replaced. So with that, I answer any questions you might have.
Move that we approve Appendix 9 request as presented.
I second.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dwayne. We're now to agenda setting for our next meeting. There's one point that I wanted to note. We're planning an exempt session on the December 12th session at 5:15 to cover negotiations. And with that, I would ask if there's any other items we need to include.
No, and actually, thanks for saying that, because I know that's not on your draft set there. And for our veteran board members, they know that that's a monthly process as we work through the negotiations. So you can plan on that first Tuesday of the month, having an exempt session prior to the board meeting to give Jane the opportunity to come in and bring you up to speed on where we're at in the negotiations process.
Yeah, I'd just like to request that if the annual grounds care report is finalized, if we could get that released.
Any other requests?
I think the new North Liberty Elementary School attendance area development process was originally placed there before we put it on tonight's agenda.
That's correct. Thank you for catching that.
Will that be too soon for an update?
Amy and I could certainly give you a process update on it. Wouldn't take long.
Sure, I don't want to,
Sure.
dig in the weeds, but if it's just where it's at.
We can give you a timeline. We've been
Timeline,
talking
maybe?
about that.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Any other feedback? If not, we'll consider that item complete, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you so much.